Just like each of you, tonight's keynote speaker has worn the blue corduroy. Him and I share a commonality of once serving as the co-president of the Roland Story chapter. Eric Hanson grew up on a farm between Roland and Story City and has lived in Iowa nearly all of his life. Eric anchors KCCI 8 News this morning and tells the stories of Iowa characters in his This is Iowa segments. His writing has been honored with 5 National Edward R. Murrow Awards, 5 National Society for Professional Journalists Awards, a National Headliner Award, 6 Emmys, and dozens of regional and statewide honors. After attending Roland Story High School, Eric graduated from Wartburg College with a double major in electronic media and public relations. Internships took him to Minneapolis and Waterloo before his first reporting job in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. In 2000, he joined the KCCI team, where he was named morning anchor in August 2014. Stories have taken Eric in every corner of the country and even to England, Haiti, and South Africa. His favorite assignments focus on the characters who make Iowa such a great place to live. From fraternity brothers who show up unannounced at high school football games to elderly musicians who strum their fiddles in an auto garage, Iowans are the centerpieces of Eric's stories. FFA members, help me in thanking our sponsor, Glenn and Maggie Stith, and welcoming our keynote speaker, Eric Hanson.
Is this your first time at Hilton Coliseum? I remember when I was here for the very first time, I sat right over about in this area. And when you're in 2nd grade and you're here at Hilton to see an Iowa State basketball game where they play right out here where you all are sitting, these are some pretty amazing seats. In fact, they're such good seats that the Iowa State basketball coach's wife at the time sat behind me. I had such good seats that I heard her screaming at the refs over my shoulder the whole game. That day, I learned some pretty 4-letter words from that coach's wife. But I had such good seats. Why? Why did I end up so close to the action as an 8th grader here at Hilton Coliseum? Well, thank you. But when I was 8 years old, I was not awesome. It all happened because of the person sitting 2 seats away from me. See, his name, not you, his name was Jordan Larson. Jordan Larson was an Iowa State University professor. Jordan was a big supporter of Cyclone athletics, and Jordan was our landlord. See, I grew up on a farm about 20 miles north of here, up by Story City, and my dad was a farmer, just like a lot of your dads were. His dad was a farmer too, and his dad was a farmer too over in Norway. In fact, as far as I can tell, I am the first guy in my entire family, as far back as my family tree goes, that is not a farmer. So what brought me here to Hilton Coliseum that day? I wasn't a farmer, but farming and agriculture still brought me here to Hilton Coliseum. It's part of my story. It's part of what got me in the door here today. So my question here as I get going is, what's your ag story? What brought you into Hilton Coliseum today? You have a story. You just need to embrace it and enjoy it. Maybe you, like I, grew up on a farm. See, I grew up on a farm, and when I was a young boy, maybe you had an experience like I did. When I was about 8 or 10 years old, and I was on our farm, and my dad said, okay, Eric, we have 2 vehicles to get over to Grandpa's place a mile away. You might be only 9 years old, but you take the pickup, I'll take the tractor, and I'll follow you. Just keep it between the ditches. Well, that's quite an instruction for about a 9-year-old boy. Well, I got out the gravel road, I turned left, and I kept it between the ditches. I was having a time of my life. Sure, I was only going about 10 or 12 miles an hour, but I got down to the corner, turned right, and I kept it between the ditches. Oh man, this was so much fun, driving right down the middle of the road, which was awesome until about a half mile down the road, I saw trouble coming on the horizon. a car coming my way, and I was keeping it right between the ditches. I did not want to ditch my dad's pickup truck. So what do you do when you're 9 years old driving a pickup a mile down the road? You just stop right in the middle of the road. I had no idea what to do. My little tuft of red hair was just over the steering wheel, and that's about all I could see. Well, thankfully, the person coming toward me was my Aunt Cindy. She saw me. She was not quite sure what I was doing out there on the county road by myself, but she went around me as I stopped in the middle of the road, and then I kept going right down the road, not quite sure whether I was having the time of my life or whether I was going to end up in a federal prison because I was driving at 9 miles an hour, 9 years old, but I went, and it was part of my story. Maybe you had a similar story, or maybe you didn't grow up on a farm. Maybe your grandpa did, or maybe a neighbor did, and you spent a lot of time in a buddy seat of a combine. Maybe that's your story. I was there too. I soaked up a lot of time in that buddy seat. Whatever the case may be, you have a story about agriculture. It's what brought you in here. And that agriculture story might be a ho-hum to you, but to people all over the world, there's fascination with agriculture. People love to hear stories about what's going on a farm. See, I work at a television station in Des Moines, KCCI, and I've worked there for 22 years, and I have loved it. I get to tell stories all over the state of Iowa and love it. But here's a secret. I have about 150 people who work at the station in front of and behind the camera. But of those 150, right here in the middle of farmland, in the middle of the country, I'm one of the very few who actually grew up on an Iowa farm. It's really cool. So when all of these coworkers move here to Iowa from all over the country, California, Georgia, Tennessee, they don't know the difference between a corn stalk and a soybean plant, and what corn is out there, they think the whole thing is sweet corn, which is cool. I find that I have an opportunity to teach them. So when they get a story idea and a story assignment to go out and talk about the bird flu, or talk about the derecho, or talk about farm yields, they come up to my desk and they say, Eric, can I get a little help on this story? They know that I'm the farm guy, and I love it. I get a chance to pass along the message of agriculture, and I get to help them along that way. And then each fall, I get the opportunity to invite them up to my family farm about 10 or 15 miles north of here, up by Story City, and bring them out and sit them in the buddy seat. Give them an experience in the combine. Give them an experience on what a GPS tractor really does. And by the end of the day, they know what a bushel is, they know what an acre is, and they know what yield is. Every time somebody comes to our farm and experiences it, they have that aha moment of, whoa, this is kind of cool. You have that opportunity too. But you don't have to invite somebody to your farm. See, as part of my job, I get a chance to tell stories. And you can tell stories too. You don't have to have a TV station to do that. Who in this room has ever heard of Cole the Cornstar? Anybody? Yeah? If you haven't, I had a chance to meet Cole last year and tell his story. Take a look at what he does to share the story of agriculture.
Drop 3 inches of new snow on any farm, and skid loaders will roll. But on this farm, nothing moves until a camera rolls first.
I feel intimidated right now.
Because this 23-year-old and his dad
All right, hey, we can put Cooper on. Hey, Cooper!
record everything.
A lot of people asking me, what do you do on the farm, like especially during wintertime, or just, what goes on? And I'm like, if you live in Iowa and you don't know what goes on a farm, how's the rest of the world supposed to know?
So 2 years ago, the 4th-generation farmer
Energy.
started sharing everything on YouTube.
My name is Cole. I'm a 22-year-old farmer from central Iowa, and if you're watching this video, you must be interested in what I do in a day.
Even how much his family's farm brings in.
So when we add our corn sales and our soybean sales, that gives us an income of $1,060,000.
And how much they spend,
Money is pretty taboo to a lot of farmers.
including, at first, Cole's dad.
This is all stuff anybody can look up. And it really gives the real world a look at how much money we go through in a year.
$50,000 maximum bid.
It turns out, an open book 6 days a week will draw a massive following.
Typically 200 to 400,000 people watch a video. About 6 to 8 million people a month tune in as a whole.
To watch videos about renovating his grandpa's farmstead,
So the house has 5 bedrooms upstairs, 5 rooms downstairs, 2 staircases.
to the derecho that clobbered them.
Holy tamales. That is an incredible amount of wind.
And so many people are watching,
I actually hired my sister now.
ads on Cole the Cornstar's channel
Through the link in the description, automatic 15% off.
are actually keeping their farm above water.
It's definitely a nice little subsidy to the farm, and it adds in with our other off-farm income, and it just kind of all comes into the farm to help things stay afloat.
All the shooting and editing
Got to clean off my workstation.
makes long days even longer. But Cole's dad, who has his own Daddy Cornstar channel, says it's so worth it.
My dad died a few years ago of brain cancer. There was a span there, I really didn't care if we farmed or not. I mean, I was just ready to hang it up. My dad was my best friend. We were always together. And with Cole doing these videos, it actually lightened me up. I got to visit with people, and then I'm like, hey, life does go on. And you start thinking of the joyful things.
We're authentic, and it's very real. We show the good, we show the bad, the ups, the downs.
Sharing farm lessons and daily laughs with a fan base now twice as big as our entire state.
That's just unreal. Absolutely unreal.
Cole the Cornstar.
Eric Hanson, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
Cole now has 500,000 followers on his YouTube channel. People watching from all over the world. Why? Because they would love to visit an Iowa farm, but they're just not here. They want to learn about agriculture. They're fascinated with it, which makes me ask you, are you proud to be on an Iowa farm? Are you proud to be from somewhere like that? That's awesome to hear, because I will admit, when I was growing up, sometimes I didn't like it. Sometimes it happened. And I can pinpoint one of the first times where I realized, farming's not for me. See, it was about 8 years old, and I was in the house. My dad was down in the barn, and he came up and said, okay, Eric, we've got a lamb, a ewe, having trouble giving birth. Your hand is smaller than mine. I need a little bit of help. Come down here, roll up your sleeve, get in there, and grab a hoof and pull. Which hand rolled up that sleeve, reached in, and pulled out a hoof? This one right here. I think I'm still scarred to this day about that time where I had to get up close and personal with the birth of a ewe, of a lamb out on the farm. I think I'm scarred for life. It was about the same age when all of my friends in Roland were riding their bikes to the town pool, and I was 5 miles away on a gravel road, and I thought, I want to live in town. I didn't appreciate what was in front of me. But still, when I was a young kid, I joined 4-H, and as soon as I got into high school, I joined FFA. And I remember the first contest I was in, too. Anybody here from Linville, Sully? Jasper County, anybody? I was down in your area my freshman year. Conduct of meetings team. I bet there's some people here who've been on conduct of meetings, right? You practice and you practice. You show up at the contest day, and I went to Linville, Sully High School, went into the bathroom to change my clothes and get ready, and I realized never in my life had I tied a tie. I had only used clip-on ties until that point. I had about 15 minutes before our contest started, and I panicked. I went out into the hallway, found my advisor, Mr. Taylor, and said, Mr. Taylor, I need help tying this tie. And Mr. Taylor said, I can't help you. I'm not very good at tying ties either. So I went back into the bathroom, and I tied and tied and tied and made this tie. I made up how to tie a tie with this knot about the size of my fist and a tie that was super short. I was stressed because the contest was just a couple of minutes away. Then I got out to the contest site, and our sentinel, Kelly, went into the room and disappeared in there forever. You know when you're supposed to set up the emblem of Washington and the corn and the owl? He came out sweating. See, we had practiced in an FFA room that was like this. This room was the mirror image of it, and he couldn't figure out where the front of the room was, where the sentinel was supposed to be. He didn't know where the secretary was supposed to be. He came out sweating and saying, "We've got trouble. I don't know where all the emblems are. Just go in and find them." Well, I was a vice president. I eventually found the plow, got up there, and it kind of went downhill from there. We did not have a good experience my freshman year of conduct of meetings team. But you know what? I learned that day to roll with the punches. And when I have to spend 2.5 hours every day on live television from 4:30 to 7 in the morning, you roll with a lot of punches. You never know quite what's ahead of you. That's what I learned, one of the things I learned my freshman year of FFA. It's part of my ag story, even though it's not ideal. We kind of screwed up that day, but we pushed on, and it's part of my story. It's part of my story because it's real. And real things happen on a farm or happen in small communities. There are some days where you go out to the barn and the birth of that animal is perfect. Maybe you even get twins or triplets. And then there are other days where the animals die. There are some days where the yield is great out in the fields, and then there are other days when a derecho comes and wipes everything away. It's how you roll with the punches. See, as I said, every morning, get this, my alarm goes off every day at 2:45 a.m. I woke up this morning at 2:45, went on the air at 4:30, and that early, about the only people who are watching are school superintendents. So for all you folks who get a snow day every once in a while, they're watching, they call off school, you're welcome. That's our job. Yeah, occasionally. But then after the newscast is done at 7 o'clock, I get to go out around central Iowa and tell stories all over the state. And I've had some awesome opportunities in 22 years. I got a chance to fly out in weightlessness at NASA, where in a plane called the Vomit Comet, that's what it's called, they picked me up, spun me in midair as I floated 7 times, picked me and put me back down. That's pretty cool. I've also had the opportunity, anybody pack meals from the heartland here? I got to see where they were opened up in South Africa. See kids actually open them up and eat them from here in Iowa. And while I was there, I got to walk with lions on a safari. That's pretty cool. I also got a chance to fly a fighter jet with the Iowa National Guard, pulling 9 Gs. I almost threw up all over the place, but I didn't, almost. I've had a chance to parachute out of airplanes. I've had a chance to follow the Hawkeyes and Cyclones to bowl games. Last summer, I got to go up to the Field of Dreams up in Dyersville, where the Yankees, yeah, there you go, where the Yankees and the Sox were playing. There's an ag story there, too. I've heard that they even had to zip tie the corn to post because of the storm that went through. It's all kind of comes back to agriculture. But you know what? As fun as those stories were, my favorite stories are the ones on main streets around central Iowa. The ones of great people who do awesome things amongst their neighbors, especially the ones that make us proud of where we come from. Stories about people like Adam from Buena Vista County. Watch this.
Spin the clock back and listen.
A tractor that's about to break down.
And you can guess
Old-timer tractor.
why they call these Johnny Poppers.
Hits beat and then it misses a couple and it hits another one and just sits there and pops.
Basically got it to have an extra tractor around the farm.
A workhorse that eventually had found a corner of Lyle's shed, sat and rusted.
All the tires were blown out except one.
Basically, I thought it was a pile of rust.
A silent heap, Lyle's teenage grandson Connor became determined to hear pop again.
Last fall he said, let's do it this winter. Let's do it this winter. I think we can get it in the ag shop and I'll use it for my class projects.
He's like, yeah, I got a tractor that doesn't need much work.
They had no idea it needed a new everything.
We're all just like, seriously?
But last fall, it became everything.
Well, it was homecoming night.
Just hours after the dance ended.
Yeah, he was on his way home. Just a mile away from his house is where it happened.
A crash took the life of the 15-year-old who bled John Deere green.
We just said we're going to do it because we know what we're doing it for.
We didn't really care of the cost or anything like that. We were just going to do it for him.
Sophomores in Mount Air's Ag Mechanics class usually tear apart lawnmowers. This year's class didn't just rebuild Lyle's 80-year-old classic.
You know, on a 2-cylinder tractor, you get gas and fire and ignition, it's going to run.
When it fired up, our grins were from ear to ear.
A few tears were shed, yes.
It was awesome.
They repaired a family.
It's helped us in healing, you know, to be able to remember him in a good way, definitely.
With elbow grease, John Deere green, and that pop.
Every time we hear it, it just puts a smile on our face.
It's more than a tractor, definitely.
In Mount Air, Eric Hanson, News Channel 8, Iowa's news leader.
That story from down in Mount Air I told about 10 years ago, and it highlights the people who do good things around our state. And there are so many awesome things around our state that happen in communities just like yours. The key, though, is to share those stories, to be proud of them. The thing is, after 20 years at KCCI, I have the opportunity, a lot of people email me and say, hey, there's a cool thing happening down my street or just around the corner. But the secret is, a lot of people get embarrassed. They don't want to go on TV. They think, oh, that's not a big deal. That's just how we do things around here. Nothing big there. Well, so I kind of have to convince them, you know what? What you're doing is good. It is important, and it is a story worth sharing. People sometimes don't want to come off as bragging, but that's okay. If you don't tell the story of agriculture in your conversations, in how you live your life, on social media, things like that, how are people going to know? People across the country aren't going to know where meat comes from. They're not going to know what a buffer strip does to keep our water clean here in Iowa, and they won't understand the devastation of bird flu or a derecho if you don't tell them what's going on in rural Iowa. See, when I was in middle school, my mom's cousin from Washington, D.C., had 3 boys about my age, and she said, hey, boys, we're not going to Disneyland or L.A. this year. We're not going to the mountains or the beach. We're going to Iowa. They said, great. This is awesome. We're from Washington, D.C., and we're going to Iowa. But you know what? After a couple days looking out the living room window in our house, they saw that horizon and all the colors, and they thought, wow, that is awesome. They jumped on our ATV and rolled around and just got to enjoy life on the farm, petting animals and hanging out and doing chores. They loved it. And they got to take an ear of corn from sweet corn, and here's a nugget. Did you know that on corn, if you break it in half and you count the number of rows around the corn, it's always an even number? They didn't know that. It might be 10, 12, 14, 16. It's never 11, 13, 15, or 17. Try it sometime. They didn't realize that, but they were able to harvest an ear of corn, boil it, and eat it in an hour, fresh sweet corn. After a week at our farm, they loved it and had such a great experience because of that. It was an actual experience. Sure, it wasn't Disney World, but they had incredible memories. And if you don't live on a farm, you can spread the memories too. Anybody here in the AgriPower FFA chapter? Are you in the house? Right back there? If you, in the AgriPower FFA group, someday graduate and go on to work at the ethanol plant down in the Eddyville area, right on Highway 63, you have a short story to tell also about agriculture, because if you don't tell that story of where ethanol comes from, then how are people going to know that that corn can be turned into fuel that powers cars across the country and it grows in your backyard? How about Kalmus-Wheatland? Are you in the area? Kalmus-Wheatland? Over in eastern Iowa, a couple people, oh, come on, a little bit louder than that. This really goes for any chapter out there. If you have a bank on Main Street and you work there someday, you have an ag story to share as well. Because farm loans are huge to small town economy. And they happen around the state, and when farmers do well, Main Street businesses do well. How about anybody from Charles City here? Charles City, are you in the house? Up in North Iowa? Yeah, you have a car dealership on the south side of town down by Highway 18. If you go to work there someday in the service or the sales area or any community around the state, when farmers do well, pickups sell. F-150s, F-250s, Silverados, Rams, they all sell well, and that helps the entire community. If you share that story of the ethanol plant or the bank or the car dealership, and people figure out across the country how important farming is to the economy, amazing things can happen. Because great things happen across Iowa. See, what happens every fall, we get stories about this when a farmer is battling cancer and they go through it. What happens? Farmers show up and combine the whole thing in one day. Get it all out of the crowd. Get it all into the bin. It's just what people do. Last month, when a tornado hit Winterset, right down Carver Road on EF4, there's a guy, 85-year-old farmer named Dwayne Bush. I met him the next day. He rode out the tornado in his red pickup truck. He saw it coming, hunkered down in his pickup. After the tornado passed and the windows were all blown out, he kicked his door out, got 85 years old, got in his skid loader and started cleaning things up, and within a couple of hours, neighbors from all over were showing up with their skid loaders, also helping out. It's just the way people do it in Iowa. It's something that we can be proud of. What happens when somebody's sick? You make a meal for the people down the road who need it. It's just what happens. So then, what happens when a tragedy happens on the farm? This is the story from Buena Vista County. Check this one out of what happened when a community came together to help one of their own.
Marry a farmer.
He's just amazing.
And you know you're getting a two-timer.
This is my favorite time of year, is harvest time.
Guys who love their wives, but get turned on.
Smell the dirt getting turned or the crops getting harvested.
By the scent and nonstop action of harvest.
If you grow up on a farm, good chances are you want to be a farmer.
It's just the way it is.
Farming's not just a job. It's an entire way of life.
Which is what Adam Skog had planned until 3 winters ago.
Just got a fresh snow.
He was out snowmobiling with his brothers.
We were riding and I didn't see a creek and went head first into it.
I had to do CPR on him at the time, so there was a time where it was iffy.
When that 29-year-old woke up 2 weeks later,
They basically said I was paralyzed from mid-stomach down.
all he could think about was his family and his calling.
When he was in the hospital, that's what he said. He said, if I can't farm, he said, I don't really want to go on. And I said, well, I guess you're going to farm then.
First thing that go through your mind, how are you going to do this? You know, how are we going to get you in the combine and all that stuff? So, yeah.
Paraplegics who work in a cubicle have a tough enough time adjusting. When your office is up there, you'll leave it to a farmer who will make it happen. That first year, his brothers used a forklift, which was less than safe.
They're used to being independent and doing things by themselves, so asking for help can sometimes be a challenge.
Today, the guy whose legs just dangle can get into his combine all by himself, which still gets his dad.
I could just tell when he got sitting in that seat, he had a big smile on his face.
In a state full of hard-headed, salt-of-the-earth guys who won't take no for an answer, Easter Seals stays busy helping 100 Iowa farmers a year figure out how to get back to work.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Adam can now get out of the combine and into the tractor in just 10 minutes. And since most farm equipment has hand controls, driving's no problem.
It's something I can do, don't need help, and I enjoy it.
Proving a snowmobile crash can take the use of half a farmer's body, but it can't steal his passion, because Bob's boy is back in the saddle.
There's nothing better. Yep, there's nothing better.
In Buena Vista County, Eric Hanson, KCCI News, Iowa's news leader.
There's something special about being in a tractor or in a combine. It just gets in your blood. That story of agriculture, hopefully when I tell a story like that, it spotlights something that kind of gets to spreading on social media, gets people excited about agriculture, their community, or our state. It's part of the story that makes us who we are. As I said, sometimes they're great stories, sometimes they aren't. In fact, sometimes they're downright embarrassing. We all have our own stories, including mine that I told at the beginning. See, before I got my Star Chapter Green Hand Award when I was in high school, and before I did the milk judging contest up in Waterloo and found out the hard way that you're not supposed to take a big swig of awful milk, just like Napoleon Dynamite, that was me. Before I did all that, I screwed up down there at that FFA opening ceremonies. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to wander for a second, and I need to go over here and remedy what I did 30 years ago. See, I know that FFA alums are not supposed to put on their jackets anymore, but at the same time, I have some unfinished business that I need to do, because that day, I realized I didn't know how to tie a tie. But I still, 30 years later, I still remember the conduct of meetings, opening ceremonies. It got stuck in my brain. I screwed it up that day the last time I talked to an FFA group, but I'm going to try not to do it today. Only this time, I'm going to double down. I've got the opening ceremonies for the plow while tying a tie to remedy my FFA story. Why is the vice president stationed by the plow? Well, the plow is a symbol of labor and tillage of the soil. Without labor, neither knowledge nor wisdom can accomplish much. My duties require me to assist at all times in maintaining order and preside over meetings in the absence of our president, whose place is beneath the rising sun. What? I'm glad you asked. The rising sun is a token of a new era in agriculture. If we will follow the leadership of our president, we will be led out of the darkness of selfishness and into the glorious sunlight of brotherhood and cooperation. Getting it done. Madam President, all officers are at their stations. I did it. Took me 30 years to do it right, but I did it. I finally did it. So I ask you, as we wrap things up, my agriculture story talks about a pickup driving down the road when I was 10 years old. My agriculture story involves sticking my hand where I didn't want it to be in the barn when I was about 8 years old and pulling out a hoof. And my agriculture story involves a corduroy jacket where I was co-president at Roland Story and proud to do so. I get to tell stories of agriculture all the time around Central Iowa, but you don't have to be on TV to share the word and share the story about Iowa agriculture to be proud of something. So here's your challenge tonight. Number one, if you're on vacation and someone says, "Where are you from?" proudly say, "You're from Iowa." And when they say, "Oh, is that the potato state?" No. Kindly correct them and say, "No, it's actually where we have corn and soybeans and hogs and cattle." And tell them a little bit about Iowa agriculture. And when you have visitors from out of town, invite them to a farm. If you don't live on a farm, call somebody who lives on a farm and say, "Hey, can we stop out and feed the cattle? Can we take a trip around your farm on an ATV and have an Iowa experience?" And third, you don't have to be Cole the Cornstar with 500,000 followers. You can share the story of Iowa agriculture on your phone, on your social media. Post things when things are going good. Post things when they're not going good so people can actually experience what life is like on a farm. They are fascinated by it, and you have a story to tell. Share that story when you're here at the convention. Share that story when you go home, and that's your assignment. Consider it your job. Consider it your labor, because, as I just said, without labor, neither knowledge nor wisdom can accomplish much. You have wisdom to impart. Share it. Be proud of being from a small Iowa town. Be proud of being from a big Iowa town that is reliant on agriculture. Brag about your community. Tell the story of agriculture to anyone who will listen, because it is a story worth sharing. And who better to do it than the experts in this room? Thank you for what you're doing to share the story of agriculture. Thank you, Iowa FFA. Oh, thank you.
Now, I'm not sure that many of us can say opening ceremonies while tying a tie. But I'd like to say, from one past Roland Story president to the other, thank you so much for inspiring our members with the stories from when you were an FFA to your stories here at KCCI. Thank you so much for inspiring our members. And here's a cutting board on behalf of the Iowa FFA.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great day, man.